unfettered spending, as we can see. We've seen the $787 original stimulus package. We saw $150 billion 2 weeks ago, and now the president is talking about another $50 billion in stimulus. It's not working.
No, it's not.
It's not working.
Can you spot places in the at the federal level where you would cut spending? I mean, right off the bat, can you see places that need trimmed that you would be willing to trim?
I think the IRS, for starters, the health care bill put in 16,000 new positions in the IRS. That's a disaster. That's terrible. I think the whole Department of Education should be abolished. We've got the 10th Amendment. Let's give those rights back to the states and the locales who know what's best for their kids. Get it out of Washington. You talked about the EPA earlier. These are organizations, they're levels and layers of bureaucracy that really we need to stop the madness. We really do.
You know, I learned some things about the EPA and pollution, and there's a gal I know who wrote a book called Healing Our World, Dr. Mary Ruwart, R-U-W-A-R-T, and she did some homework, and it turns out that the company that the largest polluter in the United States is the government. They pollute more than the 5 largest chemical companies combined. But you can't do anything because they have sovereign immunity. You can't hold them accountable. And the EPA grandfathers in polluters. But, for instance, in Great Britain, if you have waterfront property, you have the fishing rights to that property. You don't have that here in the United States. The government owns the waterfront and the water. But what would happen in Great Britain, if you polluted, you'd be devaluing the property. And so everybody downstream can sue the polluter upstream and hold them accountable. And they either have to fix it so that the entire waterway is clean and pristine again, or they have to pay out tons and tons of money. Either way, they have the cleanest waterways in the world. We have the Cuyahoga River catching fire. Pretty big difference.
Yeah, there is a big difference. You're right.
We've got a piece of legislation from the 1920s. It's a Marine Act. I was talking about this with Craig Shirley earlier in the program. And it essentially limits to American-made ships and American crews who can come into the American waterways and help clean up this oil spill, among other things. And Barack Obama has done nothing
to waive that bill.
And I would think every legislator in the country should be screaming and yelling that he needs to get off the ball and do something about that.
I think the way he has behaved during this entire disaster is it just typifies a lack of leadership. But now he's about to take this environmental disaster and turn it into economic one as well. And that's the wrong thing to do, to stop offshore drilling and to stop this. It's the wrong approach. They're going to lose hundreds of thousands of jobs and livelihoods. It's the wrong course to take. You're throwing out the baby with the bathwater here.
Once those oil rigs go out of the country, once they go to Africa and South America, they're not coming back right away. They're not there at our beck and call. We were talking about the budget a few minutes ago, and you mentioned that we don't have a budget for the first time since 1974. 74. What potentially could happen without the budget? I mean, I know in New York, if we don't have the budget and we don't pass the extender, a lot of things get shut down. Does the federal government have an extender somewhere in their back pocket, or do we just keep spending?
That's the issue. They just keep spending. And as you mentioned earlier, the debt. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we reached a $13 trillion debt. By 2012, that debt's going to exceed our GDP. This group is out of control. And I go back to what can happen this November. We can get the checks and balances in place. We can get a Republican Congress in there to put the brakes on the madness. We're talking common sense. Read the bill before you vote on it. Let's not shove pork into these bills. Let's have transparency. Let's post these bills for 2 or 3 weeks before we vote on them. The people in this district are owed that much, that a legislator would read the bill, that the bill would be in final print before they support it and they vote on it. That's just common sense, and that's what we're not getting with this administration, with this congressman.
The spending is out of control. To have a debt that exceeds the entire gross domestic product of the United States, the most powerful economy in the world is a phenomenal debt that nobody can, I got to tell you, I don't think we can pay it off. I don't know how you pay this off. We're talking trillions. It's going to be $15 trillion. And I don't believe that figure includes the unfunded mandates for Social Security, because that money is already spent. Everything over and above what goes out to Social Security recipients goes into the general fund. The general fund, they write an IOU to Social Security. So that debt is going to come due as we baby boomers retire. So $15 trillion is probably not really even close to what the debt really is.
And again, I go back to this November. If we can get a Congress in there that will we can defund the stimulus money that hasn't been spent. They're saying there's about $500 billion that hasn't been spent. We can defund those programs, get that money back, stop it. So we can hopefully have some impact on that debt and the money that's been spent. Same with healthcare. Same with the cap and trade. That's been voted on in the House. We're waiting to see what will come out of the Senate. And they're going to use this oil disaster to justify this cap and trade and this control of carbon. We
stand, ladies and gentlemen, at a threshold, and on the other side, and depending on which way we turn, it's either the road to success or it's over the precipice and into the abyss. And a lot depends on who we send back to Washington in November. It really does. It boils down to getting as many Republicans in the House of Representatives as you can get. And don't get me wrong, I would support libertarians, but we don't have any here. But you're a small government advocate, and I can get behind that. But we need you to get to Washington, D.C. We need to trim the spending. Anne-Marie Burkle, give them your website.
www.burkleforcongress.com. Thank you, Gary. Always a pleasure to be here.
Billions in debt at the state level in Albany. We've got one of their chief accountants telling